Welcome to the Sunriver Anglers Fly Tying Corner for this month. I'm going to tie a Foam Skater Salmonfly. Every year, throngs of people come to the Deschutes River during May, early June for the salmonfly hatch. It is much anticipated and a really cool time of year to fish big dry flies on big rainbow trout. This pattern is designed to fish in a style that imitates the natural Pteronarcis californica, which is a giant stonefly, or more commonly known as salmonfly. These are big bugs. They're in excess of 2 inches, and as I mentioned earlier, we'll tie this fly on a size 4 to a size 8 pattern. A couple of key characteristics to notice here are the bright orange head and orange underbody, and additionally, notice on these last couple of pictures the big black egg sac of the female, and this is important to imitate because the females come back to the river to lay eggs, and they dip and dab and drop their eggs in the water, which is when they're susceptible to feeding trout. So let's cover the materials for this pattern. I'm going to review them one by one and give you a little background on why I selected each material. For a hook, I'm going to use a Firehole 718, and I'm going to go from size 4 maybe to as small as size 8. Salmonflies are big bugs. We got to use a big hook. This is a competition barbless hook that I like a lot for this pattern. For thread, I'm going to use 210 denier thread, fairly heavy thread throughout this pattern. And for the abdomen, I'm going to use a brown 210 denier. And for the front end of the fly, or the thorax and the head, I'm going to use a hot orange or fire orange 210 denier thread. For the foam, I've cut a strip approximately 5/16 inch wide, and it is 2mm orange craft foam that I get at my craft store. Underneath the wing, I'm going to add some crystal flash in olive to give this wing some shimmer and sparkle. For the underwing, I'm using Trout Hunter's Dark Pardo CDC. I'm going to use 2 of those feathers for the underwing. For the overwing, I'm going to use elk mane, and I'll layer in 2 wings, a longer wing and a shorter secondary wing. For the legs, I'm going to take 2 round rubber legs about 2 inches long for the thorax, and then I've got 2 more shorter ones, probably 3/4 of an inch long, for the antenna of this fly. For the thorax dubbing, I'm going to use Spirit River Polar Bright Blend in a bright orange. The dubbing serves 2 purposes. One, it gives a landing area for the hackle as I wind it on a steep gradient down the thorax. But secondly, it provides some color underneath the hackle, and you'll see that as I tie it in to show the orange thorax of this big bug. For the hackle, I'm using a whiting dry fly cape in Cree. Now you can use a variety of colors. Cree is a hard color to obtain. You can go anywhere from a dark ginger all the way up to a dun. But I've used Cree for this one, and I think you'll like the look. So let's get started on this pattern. I'm going to begin by inserting a needle into my vise, and I'll tie my tying thread down toward the tip of the needle because I'm going to use this as a platform to build my foam body. Next, I'm going to take my 5/16 inch wide strip of foam and I'm going to measure off about the length of that needle and insert right in the center of that the needle and push it on through. So my tying thread will now be embedded in the middle of that foam as I fold it over the hook. So I'll go ahead and tie one wrap over the top of that foam to create the first segment, and I'll wind probably 4 or 5, 6 wraps very tightly to build that little bulbous ball of foam. And then I'll reach in between the foam layer, come across, and tie in the next segment by tying 5 or 6 wraps around the foam, and so on and so forth, until I built about half a dozen of these little balls to create the segments in the salmonfly body. With each succeeding wrap, I reach my thread in between the foam layers to pass it on back to the next segment and continue that through the entire body. And finally, when I reach the last segment, I'll go ahead and whip finish right over the top of the foam to finish off my abdomen of this salmonfly. So once I've clipped my thread, then I can take and wiggle that foam abdomen off of the needle, so I have that abdomen ready to go onto the hook itself. So now I'll take that foam and my 7/18 fire hole hook, and I'm going to insert the point of the hook through the middle of the foam and through the first wrap of thread and pierce that foam right in the middle of the abdomen beyond that last segment that I tied on a moment ago. And once I've got that done, I can insert the hook and the abdomen into the vise, and we'll be ready to start tying the next steps. So now that I've got the hook back on the vise, I'm going to tie thread onto this hook and wind it all the way back to just about tail set position. And I'll push that foam up and position it so it's extending right off the back of the hook, and then I'll bring my thread around, and just like I did on the needle, I'm going to create 2 more segments on this foam, and then I'll take the front part of the foam, clip that off to length, and go ahead and tie over that foam to give a nice platform for further materials that are going to come next. So now that I've got that platform built, I'm going to go ahead and whip finish and clip off the excess thread. So now I'm going to remove the hook from the vise and grab my black Sharpie, and I'm going to take the very last segment on this fly and I'm going to color it black. You saw in the pictures in the opening of this video that a salmon fly or female salmon fly has a big egg sac. Well, that's what we're trying to imitate with this black section on the pattern. So I've replaced the hook back in the vise, and now I'm going to tie on my fire orange thread. I'm going to use this through the rest of the pattern to imitate those front sections on the salmon fly. So I've clipped off probably about 10 fibers of crystal flash, and I'm going to tie these on up on that nice platform I built and extend them back probably about an 1/8 inch beyond the last segment of the abdomen. And I'll follow by tying 2 CDC feathers, and I've taken the whole CDC feather and I'm going to set those right over the top of the crystal flash and tie them in right again on that platform that I've created. And these will extend about the same length as the crystal flash or even a touch longer. So I've taken a clump of elk and I'm going to tie that elk again right over the top of the CDC and extending just slightly longer than the CDC, and I'll tie that down right up toward the eye of the hook, and I'll gradually migrate my thread back to the back of the thorax. And as I do that, I'm going to take some soft wraps, and then I'm going to use my thumb to press this material and kind of push it and prod it to where it spreads out on top of that fly and covers the entire abdomen and CDC. So now I'll clip off the excess, and then I'm going to repeat with a second clump of elk, and this is going to be about 2/3 the length of the first clump of elk. So it's my secondary wing on this salmon fly. So let's rotate the vise a little bit so you can see the underside of the pattern starting to emerge and how that wing lays right on the top of the fly. So now I've taken 2 strands of rubber legs, probably about 3/4 of an inch long, and I'm going to tie that in on the top of the thorax and tie that right down to the head area. And then I'll take a longer section of probably 2 inches and tie those in at the back of the thorax to create the legs on this pattern. So now I've got feelers and legs tied in. So now the finishing steps on this fly are to tie in some dubbing and hackle. And the dubbing I'm going to wind in starting just behind the head and wind that all the way back to and through the thorax area. Actually, I didn't cover all of it up because I'm going to cover that up pretty tightly with hackle. But the dubbing is, its purpose is much more to help me in that steep descent coming down the front of the fly. It gives that hackle something to grab onto and hold onto so it won't slide and roll on me. And so I've gone ahead and tied in the dubbing, and then I'm going to tie in 2 of my whiting Cree hackles that we can wind that hackle forward with. Now I'm winding both these hackles together, and in order to do that successfully you have to keep them fairly tight together to marry and wind as one unit. And I'll wind those pretty tightly forward up to the first rubber leg junction, and then I'm going to gradually separate the wraps a little bit to let some of that orange show through and show through that orange head of the natural salmon fly. So I've wound down, and I'll tie these off and clip off the excess. I crowded my head just a little bit here, so I'm going to torque it and just push that whole unit back a touch to give me a little bit more room to work around the eye of the hook. And so I'll wrap some winds underneath the feelers, and then we'll whip finish this off to finish the fly. I've got one last step on this fly to finish, so I'm going to take my Sharpie and I'm going to draw some lateral lines down the abdomen, not to fully color over the abdomen, but just add some patterning and some color and some darkening to the abdomen of this pattern to be a little bit more like the natural stonefly. So let me rotate the vise one last time so you get a nice 360 view of what this beautiful salmonfly skater looks like. This is an excellent pattern for the salmonfly hatch. With that big bushy hackle up front, you can flip and skate and move this fly to imitate the natural female salmonfly coming back to lay its eggs. And it really drives trout crazy. So that has been your Sunriver Anglers Fly Tying Corner for this month. I hope you'll give the Foam Skater Salmonfly a try. This is a great pattern, and next time you're down on the Deschutes River during salmonfly time, give this one a try and flip and skip and drive those trout crazy. If you like what you see, please subscribe to this YouTube page. And please visit us at Sunriver Anglers on Facebook. Thanks for watching.